Within the world of Gran Turismo, I find the Jag XJ220 to be kind of a funny situation. It's one of those cars that people seem to have very recently begun to really clamour for it to come back. It's a car which has gained popularity, certainly now that it's in the game. A lot of people are really happy that it's there. And yet, when it used to already be in the franchise, I didn't see a huge amount of people really using it. I'm sure there were those die-hard fans, like I am for cars like the Panos, who did love it and used it all the time, but I certainly didn't see many people doing so. And to be honest, it's not hard to see why. It was never that great of a car. The road version was fine. When you fully tune it, it was nowhere near many of the other supercars, and the racing version, although nice, was ironically quite similar to something like a Panos or a Lister Storm. Really good, but certainly not the best choice around. Now that it's back though, and technically for the first time ever in Gran Turismo with an actual HD interior, because last time we saw it, it wasn't even a premium vehicle, so that's pretty cool, we can now not only have the road-going version, we can also turn it into one of two primary options of an LM race car replica, which I may or may not be releasing in a standalone special projects video over the next few days, so stick around for that. Or, of course, the car which I'm running here, not in terms of the tune, but in terms of the visuals at least, a replica of, by far, my favourite version of the XJ220, the TWR version, the road-going XJ220S, which is legitimately one of the quickest supercars that most people have never heard of. A 680 horsepower version of the Jag, which can do 225 miles an hour. It's a monster of a car. Now, in this form, you're looking at 515 horses, of course from that very unique choice of engine. They initially planned for it to have a V12 with four-wheel drive in concept form. That did not pan out. I kind of wish it had. It would have been a good rival for our Bugatti EB110. Not that it wasn't anyway, but even more of a rival. This engine of choice, though, is of course shared with a rally car, the MG Metro 6R4 unit, here seen in 515 horsepower form. The interesting thing about this car is it's nowhere near as heavy as you'd probably think. The XJ220 looks like a huge car. It's very long, it's very wide, it's very low, very caricatured, very Hot Wheels, and yet it weighs just over 1,370 kilos, which these days is like a hatchback. That's crazy light in comparison to many other vehicles in the game. That could mean that this thing is a monster, especially when tuned. So when you do upgrade it, you're looking at well over the 700 horsepower region in the blink of an eye thanks to turbo upgrades and very little else, and you can make the weight a lot lower, barely 1 metric ton or just over 1,000 kilos. Very, very good numbers, certainly for a classic supercar in particular. But what about in practice? Because the point level is fairly modest, not even 600, 592, which again bodes very well for its usability, and to top it all off, even the price is not bad at all, at £615,000 from the Hagerty Legendary Dealer, which of course could change, that's the whole point, but for now at least, that's pretty modest. It used to be like £750,000, so it's cheaper than it used to be in Gran Turismo 6. All of these things seem very, very good so far, so what's it like in practice? In particular, coming in hot on the heels of the Porsche 959, making its debut for the Gran Turismo series. Well, it's a pretty perfect pairing, to be honest, back to back, because even though I'd probably give the Porsche the edge overall, the Jag is a very, very lovingly recreated car. You can tell that there's a lot of nostalgia for the Polyphony team in bringing this car back, because it's done so very lovingly. They've given it a lot of respect. I've heard mixed things though, funnily enough, in terms of how people are finding this car. Some people seem to find its handling to be not that great, a bit too heavy, a bit sluggish. Again, makes sense. It's, first of all, a 90s supercar, but secondly, a very big one. And of course, I've talked on the channel before about bigger vehicles, regardless of how light or heavy they are. If it's big, it's just big, so it's going to be difficult to get it around a corner. For example, if the J. Leno tank car weighed 400 kilos, it's still a massive vehicle, so you have to bear that in mind. I actually think it's a pretty pleasant car to work with. I did some fairly minimal tuning and it's extremely responsive to it, and in LM race car form, it's really good. In fact, it has far more grip than I expected it to, doesn't really step its tail out much at all, and the only issue to deal with is that lingering understeer, which, as I've said before on the channel, I will take a car that has understeer over oversteer every single time, because to me it's far easier to tune and account for understeer than it is a car that suddenly breaks loose. Of course, many cars that do break loose tend to be rewarding if you get them right, but a car that's heavy, well, if you solve that problem, or at least reduce it, you'll have yourself an absolute weapon, and that is most definitely the case here. Because even when you do build it up to strong power, much lower weight, better tyres, the PP level still doesn't go that crazy, which is very, very useful. And overall, I think that this is a fantastic representation of the XJ220. It's never been a car that I love. It's one of my less preferred of the iconic group of 90s supercars, but even for someone like me, who also is not a huge fan of the Porsche 959 either, I love both of them in the game. They are really lovingly recreated, and they are genuinely really good cars. Like I said, if you would have to choose only one of the two, I think I'd probably say go for the Porsche. It does have a couple of advantages. It's a little bit more compact, more nimble. Of course, it has the four-wheel drive advantage. You can take it off-road more efficiently than this. Strangely though, you can fit dirt tyres to this, which is a very odd choice, but I guess ties into the heritage with the MG engine, so that's a nice little Easter egg, I suppose. But ultimately, yeah, I'm really happy with it. Being able to recreate the TWR really is the icing on the cake, absolutely. And I will freely say that without those visual upgrades, I would have liked it a lot less. So it's a huge bonus for those of us who do like that deep cut reference to the iconic road-going version of a, in its own way, Le Mans legend as well, and certainly a legend of the supercar world. So I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. If you do agree with me and think it's a fantastic supercar addition to the game, then of course tell me down below, or if you don't, if you're disappointed with the car, if you don't think it's that great, and if I do have to level some criticism against it, not particularly heavy criticism because it's very easily remedied, the standard gearbox, at least when pretty much everything else is standard, is very sluggish because the gears are so long. I mean, you can see here at Le Mans, if you leave it in automatic mode as I did, it takes way too long to change gear, which takes far, far longer to get up to decent supercar speeds than you'd think it would, being a 213 mile/an-hour car in real life. So that's a little bit of a demerit, but not really, because as soon as you fit that race gearbox, it remedies it straight away. Even with barely any improvements in power, I had it getting through the gears quicker and just getting a much better feeling of flow through corners with barely any change beyond just fitting the new transmission. So it's extremely responsive to tuning, which is lovely to see, and it is, if nothing else, cool to see certainly a Gran Turismo OG legend back. Back in even Gran Turismo 2, this thing had that racing modify, and it was kind of a legendary car in its own way. But that's it for my thoughts. Of course, stick around tomorrow, wherein I will be talking about the AMG GT3 update in its own review as well, and as I alluded to earlier on, of course, check out my build for the LM Racing version if you are so inclined in the following days on the channel. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.